I don't trust anything that crawls out of Argentina with blue eyes. There's a reason for that.
Candace Owens' spiral is now just getting weird. We're going to break all this down and so much more, including highlights from the DNC, in today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics and across the internet, all from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around. And regardless, do remember to hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Now, before we dive into things, a quick programming announcement. I am traveling to lovely Colorado later this week. Tomorrow morning, very early flight, so there will be no show on Thursday and Friday. I'm going to be out of town for a couple days attending an important and exciting conference. So sadly, you guys will have to go a few more days without seeing this lovely face and catching up and losing brain cells with me, but we will be back at it Monday. Don't you worry. And now, let's check in on Candace Owens, the right-wing conservative commentator and viral sensation. Since leaving the Daily Wire in controversial circumstances a little while back, Candace has gone out on her own, done her own show, totally unfiltered, seeing the real Candace. And frankly, it's gotten pretty weird. She's spiraled into a lot of, frankly, anti-Semitic territory when it comes to her coverage of Israel and other stuff that goes far beyond just criticizing Israel and ends up in some pretty weird places. And now she's somehow in the position where, speaking about Latin American politics, she is sympathetically speaking about the communist dictator of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and critically / conspiratorially speaking about the freedom-loving, free market right-wing leader of Argentina, Javier Milei. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but this clip is going viral and I want to break it down with you guys. Let's take a listen.
They had an election and their incumbent president, Nicolas Maduro, we all know who Nicolas Maduro is, and my suspicion is he's actually about to be killed, and I'll tell you why they're calling it electoral scam. First among them, Milei in Argentina. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't trust anything that crawls out of Argentina with blue eyes. There's a reason for that. And that reason is because after World War II, a lot of Argentinians suddenly had blue eyes. And so I do not trust Milei. Maduro responded to Milei by calling him a cowardly bug and a traitor to the homeland and a fascist. Now, the fascist part might be true. I don't know. I got to see his genealogy because I just don't trust anything with blue eyes that comes from Argentina. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there from Candace. First and foremost, she's talking about the recent election that Maduro held in Venezuela that most outside analysts think was a sham election, not a real election, because he somehow won with a majority of the vote despite having destroyed his country through terrible socialist policies and created a mass emigration crisis with millions of Venezuelans literally fleeing the country and insane levels of inflation that have devastated the population. So for one thing, there's actually a lot of evidence that the election was rigged. And two, the idea that he would be reelected with a majority of the vote under these circumstances doesn't pass the sniff test to begin with. And Javier Milei from Argentina was one of the first global leaders to call out this likely sham election. Yet Candace is now saying she doesn't trust Javier Milei, who's a very right-wing, pro-freedom candidate and leader in Argentina, because of the color of his eyes? Now, to be clear, what she's suggesting here is that Javier Milei, apparently, may be descended from people who were part of the Nazi Party, because many Nazis famously fled Germany after World War II and moved to Argentina. She's suggesting that maybe that's where he's descended from, and that's why he has blue eyes. To be clear, this is kind of wild speculation. There's no actual evidence of this, and there are plenty of other reasons he could have blue eyes. It's not just people from Germany who have had blue eyes who've moved to Argentina. Heck, people from Spain sometimes had blue eyes, and obviously they're intermixed with the Argentinian DNA and ecosystem there. But more importantly, even if Javier Milei were somehow somewhere up the line in his genealogy related to somebody who'd fled from Germany after World War II, so what? That wouldn't make him untrustworthy because of the color of his eyes. And it wouldn't make him a fascist just because he was distantly related to somebody who was. If anything, the policies and the actual agenda he's espoused and believes in is the opposite of fascism. It's all about limited government and freedom and individual liberty, not statism and repression. So Candace's little rant here, where she's seemingly sympathizing with the brutal communist dictator and yet coming out swinging against and undermining and attacking the credibility of a freedom-loving leader like Milei just because of his eye color and baseless theories about his genealogy is genuinely bizarre. Now, it might have something to do with the fact that Milei has been outspoken in his support for Israel, whereas Maduro has been outspoken in his opposition to the state of Israel, and Candace increasingly seems to be falling deep down the rabbit hole and making that issue her entire lens of looking at the world. But it's truly bizarre stuff, guys, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I've been critical of Candace Owens for many years now, so much so that she blocked me on Twitter back in 2019. And it's been interesting to see in recent weeks and months and years, many on the right suddenly call out Candace and realize that she's not the most serious or stable person, because some of us pointed this out many years ago. Ultimately, I'm kind of concerned how many millions of people still seem to be hanging on Candace's every word, because if she was just kind of spiraling and doing her own thing, okay, I guess, but it's concerning to me that millions of people still trust her as a source of information, yet she's using that platform to push very bizarre notions, like this weird thing about Javier Milei. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you also been noticing Candace seeming to spiral into crazier and crazier territory as of late? And now we're going to talk about an example of mainstream media shilling for Kamala Harris in a truly brazen and shameless way. So as I covered on the show before, Kamala recently suggested that she intends to pass federal initiatives cracking down on price gouging in the grocery sector, essentially making companies charge lower prices and punishing them if they charge prices she feels are too high. And doing this despite the fact that the grocery sector runs on incredibly thin profit margins to begin with, of about 1.5% on average, and that price gouging is not a significant factor or really going on at all when it comes to grocery stores. She got a ton of pushback for this economically illiterate idea of implementing price controls, including from even surprising sources like the Washington Post. So others in the mainstream media are going full gaslighting defense mode and telling us that no, when Kamala says that she wants the federal government to prevent companies from charging high prices, that's not price controls. Here's the headline from Axios. Don't call it price controls. How price gouging bans really work. The reporter writes, one of Kamala Harris's most controversial policy proposals is a ban on grocery price gouging. Critics are conflating the idea with Soviet-style price controls and calling the plan communism. Are they conflating it with price controls? Or is she literally saying that her goal is to control the prices? The reporter continues, why it matters. If banning price gouging is communist, then the US went Marxist long ago. Most of us live in states that already have bans in place. This bit right here is kind of misleading, but we'll get into it more in a second. Axios says, the state of play. Harris hasn't provided much detail. So she hasn't provided detail, but you're certain she's not doing price controls. Make that one make sense for me, bud. That's led to wild speculation about what the plan could mean, including opinion pieces expressing fears that retailers won't be able to, say, set the price of a gallon of milk, and that it would lead to widespread shortages, black markets, and hoarding. Yeah, because that's what price controls typically do lead to. So are those widespread fears, or are those reasonable concerns? Now, the gist of the argument of this news item in Axios, which really reads as an opinion column and should be labeled as such, but isn't, because that's how mainstream media works now, is that because we have so-called price gouging laws in many states, that price controls are fine and not really price controls because we already do them or something. Zoom in. 38 states, including the most populous ones like Texas, California, and New York, prohibit companies from jacking up prices during emergencies. Think bans on selling $10 bottles of water after a major hurricane. How it works. The laws are triggered by an event, typically a natural disaster like a hurricane, pandemic, or even a strike, at a time when the governor or the federal government has declared an emergency. Once triggered, some laws explicitly prohibit price hikes above a certain threshold, anywhere from 10 to 25%. Others are more subjective, banning egregious or unconscionable price increases. Oh, so it's almost like they're trying to control prices, aka they are price controls. So this Axios author's argument is that we shouldn't call Kamala Harris's proposal for price controls because we already have price control laws in narrow settings in some states. Huh? We already have tax cut bills in many states that pass, but if federally someone proposes a tax cut, we can still call it a tax cut. Now, I guess what the author is really trying to suggest is that the idea isn't as radical as it sounds because we already have these on the books in some states. But this is also wrong. For one, we really shouldn't have these laws on the books. They actually hurt the ability to respond to an emergency, but that's kind of a topic for another time. Two, these laws are narrow. They're only during an emergency, right? After a hurricane or something like that. They're not in place most of the time. Whereas what Kamala is talking about is just in general, not during a specific moment after something bad happens, just in general, preventing companies from charging high prices that she thinks are too high. That's fundamentally different in both kind and degree to these price gouging laws at the state level that this author is attempting to use as a deflection. The truth is, Kamala Harris is proposing really radical, far-left economic ideas, and mainstream media outlets like Axios know that these ideas are radically out of step with the American public and know that they would not work out well. But they're totally in the tank for Kamala, so they're trying to shamelessly gaslight us into thinking that Kamala's actually not proposing what she says she's proposing. I'm more inclined to take Kamala Harris at her word when she says her plan is to control prices than to believe the media outlets telling me that all she really wants to do is control prices, but her plans are totally not price controls. The community notes feature on X really ate up Axios when they posted this shameless bit of gaslighting. They pointed out that the very same author called it price controls when the UK proposed voluntary caps on grocery store profits. So if you call it price controls when there's something voluntary, which technically wouldn't even be a price control, right? Because a price control is not voluntary. But if you're going to use the language that loosely in other scenarios, you can't then claim that actual, not voluntary plans from Kamala Harris aren't price controls. Your Delulu is showing. In the same way, Axios called it price controls when it was proposed to limit how much Russia could profit off of oil in a time of crisis. So if that's a price control, then doing the same thing categorically for the grocery sector in all times, not just times in crisis, is definitely a price control, my dude. I can't say that I'm particularly surprised by this level of gaslighting coming from mainstream media, but I am glad that people are finally starting to wake up to it and see just how dishonest a lot of the spin coming from establishment journalism is when it comes to the candidates they're supposed to be neutrally covering. Up next, the Democrats have spent a lot of time calling Republicans weird lately, and to be fair, a lot of Republicans are kind of weird, but the DNC is doing some stuff that I think could also fairly be described as odd or yes, even weird, during the ongoing Democratic National Convention, including offering abortions and vasectomies on site for anybody who wants them and gets a reservation. The Free Press's Julia Steinberg stopped by the site of the mobile vasectomy and abortion station at the DNC and posted this interesting video showing us what it's like there behind the scenes.
I am Julia, the intern with the Free Press, and today I am in Chicago where the DNC is happening at the Into Action exhibit. There is a van offering abortion pills and vasectomies. I tried to sign up, but the list was full. And in here, an art exhibit with art about abortion. I was just wondering if you could tell me what's in this van.
That's a mobile healthcare clinic.
What forms of healthcare are in there?
Today is medication abortion, and yesterday was vasectomy.
You've had really high demand, right?
Yeah, people need to access healthcare wherever they go.
The tacos, it's only free if you get the vasectomy?
Yep. Oh yeah.
No one can really answer the question of why there's this vasectomy van at the DNC, giving a point to the abortion haters that the left wants to scream abortion in their face. Instead of being safe, legal, and rare, it's something that should be celebrated. If you have tacos and a giant IUD, that's being celebrated.
So here's my thing. I have friends and people I respect on either side of the abortion debate, and I can understand that people of good faith and different value systems can earnestly hold either position in what is undoubtedly a complicated and nuanced issue over the legality of abortion. But what I'll never really understand, and I don't think I'll ever really be comfortable or okay with, is the glib nature of some, not all, Democrats and liberals' approach to abortion. The whole shout your abortion kind of thing, where you're not just arguing that this is something that needs to be legal, or the good old safe, legal, and rare mantra the Democrats of yesteryear had. Instead, you're arguing that abortion is like a fun or cool thing and we should be happy about it, which has always rubbed me really the wrong way, because even for women who do make that choice, it's often a deeply sad and traumatic thing, and it's not something I think should ever be taken lightly or viewed as cool or trendy or nonchalant. But to me, this kind of does show the Democratic Party's tilting towards radicalism on the abortion question, where they're really no longer, at least in large part, no longer the party of safe, legal, and rare, the whole Bill Clinton approach, but instead are increasingly the shout your abortion, yes, queen, Planned Parenthood, slay type of party, which I think many Americans, even many who think abortion should be legal in some form, find distasteful and off-putting. The vasectomies part is also so wild to me. I guess the idea is that because places are passing abortion bans, we need to all step up and do our part to prevent unwanted pregnancies. And look, I've got nothing against people who want to get vasectomies. It's your life, it's your body, knock yourself out. But to be doing it casually at a mobile station outside a political convention is just strange. I mean, I'm no doctor, so take everything I'm about to say with like an entire bucket of salt. But I think it's not the most minor of thing to have done. It can actually put you in a significant amount of discomfort or pain afterwards for a good amount of time. So what? Are people just going to be walking around the DNC afterwards holding a massive ice pack on their balls? It's just strange that it would need to be done in this time or setting, let alone that the lists would sell out. Again, I've got nothing against people who want to get vasectomies. Do whatever you want, right? Whatever makes sense. But this setting seems bizarre to do it. I'm just struck by watching the scenes unfold from the DNC, just how much has changed and how much the Democratic Party has shifted to the left, even in just the last 10 or 15 years. Bernie Sanders has gone from once a total fringe figure, the crazy far left flank of the party, to now, one of the main headline speakers who pretty much everybody agrees with, at least on a lot of things. They've gone from safe, legal, and rare to abortion and vasectomy trucks parked outside, free tacos if you get the snip snip. It is just sad and alarming to me, the extent to which both parties seem to have moved further and further towards the extremes. And yes, towards being weird. And now, I'll read a few of your comments before we wrap up today's episode. One person writes that I'm white and I love spicy food. I love habaneros dipped in ranch with all the seeds. My wife is pure Mexican and can barely handle pepper in her food. Stereotypes are stupid sometimes. Yeah, they are stupid if anyone takes them too seriously or applies them categorically. But I will say, maybe it's just my anecdotal experience, I do know a lot of white people who cannot handle spice in their food. But that couldn't be me. I mean, I like not insanely spicy food, but I like a good kick. I like Indian food in particular, which, especially if you get it, how they actually eat it, is pretty darn spicy sometimes. Another person writes, I have caught myself telling people when they're acting unhinged to put the crack pipe down lately. I chuckle in my head every time. It's golden. I love that. Look at me making a difference out there in the world, leaving a positive legacy behind. Another person writes, Brad is going to be at least 200K by the end of the year. Keep it up. Dude, from your lips to God's ears. I would love to make that happen, but who knows? Another person says, hey Brad, I agree with you on the Men Are Trash TikTok video 1000%, and you can articulate our opinion significantly better than I can, which I'm very jealous about. Oh, thank you. However, it does have a catchy tune. When your video was over and I went about my household business, I found myself singing, Men Are Trash. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Yes, it's really funny to me because the same thing happened to me and my boyfriend. We were walking afterwards and I just kept going, Men Are Trash. Because I will say this, I think it's a horrific video in many ways in the substance, but the tune was catchy. It was a little bit of a bop. So Another person says, Brad, you're looking like you need a haircut. Said with love. Wow, okay. Drag me, I guess. No, you're actually right. I've been meaning to get one. I've just been crazy busy. But I'll try to do that soon. For you. Another person writes, yes, my fellow gay man. Bash the woke movement. The very movement that made it so people treat you, a gay man, as a normal person. Okay, so I have many thoughts on this interesting piece of feedback. First off, even if it were true that the woke movement had achieved acceptance for gay people and that I owed my rights and my acceptance to the movement, that wouldn't mean that I shouldn't criticize it if I think it then goes on to do things that are wrong. You shouldn't ever have blind tribal loyalty to someone, and just because they were right in the past doesn't mean they're right now or will be right in the future. That's NPC logic, my friend. But more importantly, the woke movement did not achieve gay rights. The old school liberal movement that achieved gay rights is very different than the modern woke TQ plus alphabet movement. In fact, the fight for gay rights was very much framed in a way of assimilation, acceptance, normalization, not this radical, tear everything down, you will submit, you will bake the cake, you will use my pronouns type approach that defines the modern woke movement. It's actually two very different things. But other than that, go off, I guess. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to miss you guys the next couple of days, but we'll talk again on Monday. Before you go, make sure to comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments. Do hit that like button, and please do subscribe so we can hit 200K by the end of the year.